we are going to move to our final speaker of the day, which is Stephen Munatones, and he is the CEO of KAATSU. Stephen is at the helm of global movement known as blood flow restriction. It's a technology that originated in Japan about 5 decades ago and is being used by some of the most elite athletes and military forces on the planet. We didn't get into the conversation with Dr. Sanderson, but she is one of the individuals among many that is out there referring people to KAATSU as part of their exercise regime. She mentioned other types of interventions, and I know that they also use the oxygen therapy that Mark Squibb was talking about, LiveO2. Stephen's mission really has evolved beyond the realm of elite performance with KAATSU, and it's emerging really as a potentially critical intervention for the challenges we fear most, which are traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline. All of those are at play, and all of those can be addressed by KAATSU. The KAATSU method is really very safe. It's done by strategically moderating blood flow. Stephen's going to walk us through this. He's been finding ways to trigger the body's own biochemical pharmacy with this process to release growth hormones, vascular endothelial growth factors, and nitric oxide. Those are the key 3 things at play here. He's going to tell us how those work in detail to improve and repair the brain. I want to welcome him to the stage. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
You've got a great presentation here, and everybody's in store for a real treat. It's very succinct and visually very appealing as well. So I want to turn this over to you and let you walk everybody through that, and then we'll come back for Q&A.
Okay. Well, we're going to explain about the science and some of the stories between the connection between KAATSU and neuroplasticity. KAATSU is a Japanese word, and some of you may have heard the word shiatsu. Shi means hand, and atsu means pressure. KAATSU means additional. Ka means additional, and atsu means pressure. And that's what the technology does. It puts additional pressure on through bands, pneumatic bands on your upper arm and upper legs. That's all the equipment does. Now, the protocols that we use on this equipment enables the engorgement of blood in the arms and the legs. And that in itself doesn't seem how and why does it affect anything in our brain, but it does. Just a little explanation. If you engorge your arms and legs in blood, because we have a finite amount of blood in the body, what we found, and this was not an immediate discovery, it came over time. What we found is that immediately there's less blood in the brain, and the brain doesn't like that. And what we found from Switzerland to Japan to here in the United States is that when we were doing this protocol using our bands, that with these new capillaries in our brain, that we were increasing cerebral blood flow. Initially, we thought the KAATSU equipment was more for the building muscle and more for precisely the demographic we were looking at, which was the aging population in Japan. KAATSU was developed in Japan by a Japanese doctor, and the goal was to maintain the muscle mass of the oldest population in the history of our planet, which is Japan. They have more older people over the age of 50, over the age of 65, over the age of 100 than any other country in the history of the world. And so the doctor's mission was, Dr. Sato, was to create muscle or help the people not lose as much muscle as possible. But along that journey, he found that when he was using the equipment on the arms or the legs, that the people were being cognitively more aware, they were being sharper, they were being more eloquent. And initially, it took 2 decades to connect the two. It was only when Dr. Sato teamed up with a group of cardiologists at the University of Tokyo Hospital, and this is where I came in, and this is where I was mentored and taught KAATSU, in that people were saying, Doctor, yes, I feel a little more muscle tone, but more importantly, I'm remembering things better and more quickly. And so the cardiologists at the University of Tokyo, starting in the mid 90s, but then really ramping up in the year 2004. I joined in 2001. That is when they started to do very specific clinical research on the individuals. And so dial forward another 20 years, and it was very interesting that, as Dr. Sanderson mentioned in the previous talk, Dr. Bredesen and others from Europe, South America, China, and the US started to recognize that the effects of KAATSU, initially to avoid or minimize the effects of sarcopenia or the degradation of muscle mass, they started to connect that separate goal to cognitive awareness. And initially, again, it wasn't our specific goal, but especially for our older population, especially for people over 70, 80, 90, and all the centenarians that we were working with, they were more appreciative of the cerebral benefits than they were of the muscular benefits. Both were important. Both allowed our older population to walk upstairs, to literally be able to be more mobile in their daily lives, but also more importantly, to remember and do things that they had sort of given up on, if you will. And so beginning in 2004 to 2014, so a 10-year period, what we did was a very long-term study with 12,000 patients in Japan, primarily older, but 1 out of 6, or a little over 2,000, were those that were undergoing cognitive rehabilitation. And there we started to understand that the increase in cerebral blood flow was leading to other things. Now, again, in Japan, what we were focused on was keeping the older population as mobile and as active as possible, because unlike here in the United States or other places, there continues to be fewer and fewer younger Japanese to take care of the older Japanese. With Dr. Sato and myself, we were part of the 22nd Century Project of Japan. The 22nd Century Project of Japan was looking forward 100 years to see what did the country and what does the medical community, what does the society need to do now, or what do we need to be prepared for now in order to have a healthy, cognitively aware population 100 years from now. Now, of course, it was a thought experiment, but what we were doing was setting the path to new innovations, to revolutionary types of treating individuals. How KAATSU works is very simple. Again, I have a band on my arm, which we'll show after the PowerPoint presentation. And you can see the engorgement of my arm, and therefore the brain has less blood initially than it would before, incrementally, but enough to influence angiogenesis, or the creation of new capillaries in the body. It seems quite simple, but it was incredibly profound. And the reason why is if we take the human body, the average human, you, me, anybody else you know, and we line up our capillaries end to end, that distance of all our capillaries in the body can wrap around the earth 2 times. About 60,000 miles of capillaries in our body. And that is what the Japanese founder and cardiologists were quite interested in. How do we affect our blood flow? How do we moderate it to actually produce a variety of cognitive and functional benefits? Here's a quote by Dr. Bredesen. I'll let you read it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say we're having a delay on the slides here.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve, I want to interrupt you. Just so everybody can get caught up on the slides.
Okay.
Okay, what we're seeing now is the ageless brain.
Okay.
Image.
Okay. Okay. And
do we need to go forward one more, I think?
Yes, forward one more.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
it's a quote by the doctor.
we're caught up now, Steve.
Okay. And it says, or he says, it may take even more time before one of the most intriguing aspects of KAATSU, its potential impact on brain health, will also reach the mainstream. I do suspect that it will happen though, and I'm not alone. And what he means by I'm not alone, there are not only the medical professionals, but also individuals. Some of them, or many of them, are military veterans injured in war or in training. I'll explain some of their case studies later in the presentation. Some of them have taken bullets to the brain. Some of them have had hard landings from parachute jumps. We have others who have had mountain climbing accidents, car accident victims, etc. And so, what he means by "I'm not alone" is at how we grow is that these people who are maybe at their, a little bit desperate in how they can improve themselves, somehow find themselves to us. And so, whether it's Dr. Bredesen, Dr. Peter Lansbury, Dr. Aaron uh, Begish, we're finding different people. And so there is a growing body of research. It ranges. These are 5 publications where we've done a variety of published peer review studies. There are many others. In addition, we have our clinicians, primarily in Japan, but increasingly in Switzerland, in Germany, here in the United States, who are also doing very far forward thinking. And they're simply taking what we've done with KAATSU and applying it to their own areas and for their own patients. We here at KAATSU Global, what we do is we simply teach people how to use the bands and how to use our protocols properly. We let the professionals and those clinicians who are focused on different areas, it could be PTSD, which is a big issue with the military, and also in amongst the younger population. We allow people who are orthopedic surgeons or neurologists who are focused on individuals who have had unfortunate accidents or injuries, and we let them utilize KAATSU as they see best. Okay, so I'm going to go through some case studies here, and this is actually me 10 years ago. I had a widowmaker heart attack. When they put me through what they call the Arctic Sun protocol, which is purposely decreasing the body's temperature. My cardiologist told my wife as I was in the ICU, I think you have to be prepared for significant neurological damage. And my wife said, "Oh, it's okay." When I awoke 7 days later, I had no idea where I was. I had no idea what happened to me, and things were foggy. In the hospital, in the ICU, when I awoke, I actually asked my cardiologist can I use KAATSU? He had no idea what KAATSU was. I actually said to him, I said, well, my wife always carries it in her purse, and I had the bands there. I showed him, and he said, no way, no how. You're not going to use whatever that is in my hospital under my care. I said, okay, I understand. When I was released and went back home and I was visited, I lost 30 pounds. Again, I was a little bit foggy. I wasn't quite sure what happened to me. I started to use KAATSU because what I was doing was I was taking what I learned in Japan at the University of Tokyo Hospital, everything that I had seen, all the patients that I had made the rounds with the doctors, I actually started applying that to myself at my home on myself. And nothing changes immediately, nothing changes overnight, but gradually I was able to, what I think, return back to normal. And it was quite interesting. I took a EEG a few years later, and the doctor said to me, did you have a traumatic brain injury in your life? And I said, no. He says, are you sure? Did you ever fall off a bike when you were a kid? Did you fall out of a tree? Did you have any accident? I said, no, I've never had an accident. He goes, are you sure? And then he showed me the results, and he showed me where essentially there was no brain activity. I said, nah. I said, the only thing I can think of is I had a heart attack. And he goes, oh. And that was a period of time. I was actually saved by my 17-year-old son, who gave me hands only CPR for about 20 minutes. And he says, that's the way it is. I immediately recognized that although KAATSU was meant as a means to improve the vascular elasticity, or the vascular strength of the human body, I realized then that was actually more beneficial to my own cognitive awareness. And this is an example of one, but it taught me, because I was literally treating myself after a heart attack. This was me for 7 days in the ICU. And I remind myself, I look at this photo and I go, look at, this is someone who, and the someone is me, who has actually taken KAATSU and done very gently, daily. And I don't do it when I'm doing push-ups. I don't do it while I'm running up a hill. I don't do it with vigorous exercise. I use KAATSU, as I have it on my arm here, as I'm typing emails, as I'm on a Zoom call. So I'm doing it very, very gently, but I'm doing it frequently, day by day. The next case that I want to show is, this is Green Beret Sergeant Joe Lowry. He actually lives near me. I was introduced to him by his neurologist and his healthcare staff. I met him 6 years after he took a bullet to the brain. He was a Green Beret. He was fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. And as he was leading the troops, he had about a finger long bullet go through his Kevlar helmet and hit his head. They removed his part of his brain. He was transported from Afghanistan to Germany, from Germany to Walter Reed, from Walter Reed to Southern California. 6 years after that fact, he was released from the hospital. And when I met him, and through introduction by his doctors, I went visit his house. I put the KAATSU first on his arms and then on his legs. And I didn't know exactly what his issue was. The entire time he had his cell phone, and he was videotaping me. And he asked me, can I videotape you? I said, sure. And I have no problem. He says, because as soon as you tell me something, I'll forget it. And I want to remember this. So he videotapes the conversations. That was another 5 years ago that I first met him. I went through it. He's in a wheelchair, and I said, Joe, can you stand up? Because I need to put the bands around your upper leg. And being a good soldier, he stood up. And when he stood up, we were eye to eye. He's actually a bit taller than me. And he said to me, how did I get up here? And I said, Joe, you stood up. And he goes, I can't stand up. I said, Joe, you're standing up. Look down. He looked down. Dial forward 5 years. Joe, who had the initial meeting, he had to videotape my conversation to remember what I had just told him. Well, he has been cleared to drive himself. He has been cleared to get his driver's license, and he has a specially made van. And now Joe gives very eloquent talks. And again, this is an example of Joe. Joe uses KAATSU twice a day. He puts it on his arms, then on his legs. He does his morning routine, which is very, very simple movement on his arms and legs. And then at night, and this is very, very important for people who want to really increase their sleep blood flow, he does it within an hour of going to bed. And because Joe does most of his KAATSU when he's horizontal, It actually is really, really beneficial. The next case study that I want to briefly mention, and this is an incredible one. This is a 104-year-old. She is a great grandmother in Japan. When I first met her, it was in the presence of her two daughters. And at the time, they were one was 80 and one was 81. And they had been going to the hospital to meet her on a daily basis, but she was nonverbal. She was bedridden when I saw her. Incredibly, the doctors put on the bands on her arms and then on her legs as she was in this non-cumulative state. They did it every day without fail. First arms, then legs. Pressure on, pressure off. That's what the bands do. They inflate with air and then deflate, inflate with air, deflate, and they do it incrementally. What that does is it actually increases the blood volume in the brain very, very gently, very, very uh, incrementally. One day, her two daughters had mentioned, "Gosh," and nothing out of a malice or anything, but her two doctors said, "Gosh, when is mom going to pass away?" Because they themselves were in their 80s. Getting to the hospital for them was a chore. And the mother, out of the blue, says, "I can hear you." Of course, the daughters were shocked. After they got over their shock, tears were flowing from the mother and her two daughters. And this is a photograph of her. Actually, you can see the band, some black bands over her arms here. And it took a while. It took about 6 months, but she went from that bedridden state to a state where I believe we have a video here, and we can actually see her. If I can get the video to run. This is her doing KAATSU exercises at 104 years old with the bands on her legs. And she's 104 years old. And in the video, she explains herself. Again, it doesn't seem like much, but for her being 104 years old, to count, to communicate with her healthcare professionals and her daughters was incredible. It was one of the most remarkable things that I did. But in that process, Dr. Sato and her health staff were saying, this is not unusual. This is what we do. This is what we expect. Patience is needed. It's not an overnight transformation, but this is what we do. And I just looked at them like in shock. And they said, Steve, the most important thing you can do for people to do KAATSU, the most important thing, and the thing that we aim for is after each session, we want the patient to smile. And they said, you need to get the patient to have the KAATSU smile. He said, the smile radiates enjoyment, satisfaction, and appreciation. And I was just profoundly impacted by that. When we can get people to use the product, to use the protocols, and we end the session and they're smiling, it really is the inner mirror of their enjoyment, their appreciation, and their satisfaction of what we're doing. And so, these are just some of the case studies that we've done, and this is here. And again, I'll end there, and I'm sure there's lots of questions, but if anybody wants any more additional information, we can provide this QR code later for questions and follow up.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Uh-huh.
That was really very phenomenal case studies especially yours, right? That you went through it, and what a testament.
Yeah.
That your use of that happened, I don't know, was it 2 decades after you started learning about KAATSU?
Correct. It was about 16 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you were a fan, you knew how it worked, and then you had the opportunity to put it to use on yourself.
Correct. And again, if you understand the Japanese culture and the Japanese form of education, when I first met Dr. Sato, until the time he said, "You're ready to go teach KAATSU and share KAATSU outside of Japan." It was 13 years. So
Mm,
it was 13 years of training. If you know anything about, how Japanese sushi chefs are trained, they first have to learn how to wash the rice before they ever get to cutting the fish. And that's
mm,
really what Dr. Sato and the cardiologist taught me. They wanted me to see amputees, quadriplegics, people with cerebral palsy, people with neuropathies, people with PTSD, people that had traumatic brain injuries. They wanted me to see dozens and hundreds of these patients to stand there by their side as they were applying KAATSU. And it was their approach to KAATSU that made an impact on me. And when they were asking the patient, "What do you want to do?" When they would ask a quadriplegic who had had a traumatic brain injury and had no longer use of their arms or legs, "What do you want to do?" That was their first question. And quite often, the patient would say something that we did not, or at least I did not expect. They would say, "I want to have the ability to feed myself," or "I want to have the ability to do ABC." And that was always their first approach. What does the patient want to achieve? What's the first thing? What's the most impactful thing? And they taught me to modify the protocols to get that first win. And in the
mm.
case of the 104-year-old woman, when she woke up, she realized she had all this lost time with her daughters, and she wanted to express all the love and appreciation for them and her health care staff to help her. And so what we were doing there was we were focusing on her upper body. Why her upper body? Because like I'm doing now, just talking and holding on to something and writing stuff down. It takes time, but this is what Dr. Sato meant about end every session with a KAATSU smile.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that is so moving for me, and it's clear you care so much, Steve. So from a personal standpoint, and that comes, I guess, in part from that 13 years of training to get to the point where you're able to train your own personal experience, and then seeing all of these recovery stories. I wonder, going way back though, what was the aha moment for you when you were learning
Ah,
about KAATSU that says, yeah, this is going to be my life's dedication. I'm going to do this for the rest of my time.
yes. Well, I met Dr. Sato by accident. So when I first learned about KAATSU, I was actually at the world. This sounds strange. I was at the World Swimming Championships, and
Mm,
there I was translating as a swim coach between English and Japanese for the U.S. team.
ah,
I was I had to go to the bathroom. I went into the locker room and I saw athletes, some of the best swimmers in the world, Japanese, with these bands on their arms. I had no idea why they had bands on their arms. So I went to their coach and I said, why do they have bands on their arms before they're going to be in this world championship final? And he said to me, "Well, um, I think I have a good idea, but it's better that I introduce you to our doctor, Dr. Sato." And I said, "I
mm,
would love that. I would love to learn more." And he said, "Great." He set up the meeting. I went immediately after the competition. I met Dr. Sato. And to answer your question is, when I went to his clinic, there was a line of older Japanese just waiting. And one by one, they would enter his clinic one by one they would come out. And I don't know if you remember the old movie On Golden Pond, when people would
mhm.
would walk in and suddenly they go in this pond and they come out like young. They still had wrinkles, they were still bent over, but they had this glow about them. And so I stayed in line. I got my number. I stayed in line, and when I got to um, meet Dr. Sato, I introduced myself. He says, "Oh, I know you were coming. I was expecting you." I said, "Dr. Sato, I was in the waiting room and he had all these old people and they looked old." He said, "Yeah, but how did they look when they exited?" And that's when he explained to me the KAATSU smile. And that's when he said, I I need somebody like you because we have this modality, this technology in Japan. He didn't travel outside of Japan. He didn't speak any English. And he said, I need to share this with somebody. And I think you're the one. And I said, thank you very much. There's a lot of pressure. And he said, and I said to him, how do I learn about Katsu? I said, is there a book? Have you written stuff? And he was in the midst of the early research. And he says, well, Steve, he goes, it's all up here. It was in his head. And so from that point on, I just had to learn from him, just stand by his side, go to hospitals, go meet his patients, and just sit there and observe what he was doing. And his burning passion became my burning passion.
So it's all about you spent your life trying to create some smiles. That's the takeaway I'm gathering.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's something about the Japanese culture because they are one of the blue zones. And if you don't know what the blue zone is, it's the regions in the world for people who are centenarians, those that live to be 100 and above. And this seems to fit right into that cultural persona of ensuring that life is balanced and that you're living it healthy all along the process with in small ways. It seems to me that it's smaller ways. Do you have a comment on that could help people take something beyond just the katsu?
Yes. So the blue zone, as you explained, was accurate with two additions. One is the concept of ikigai, or having a purpose in life, having
Mm,
something that you love to do and you can do literally until the day you die. That's one. And the second is having a sense of community, having a sense of appreciation of things around you. And this is what Dr. Sato meant about that Katsu smile. When he knows as a clinician, his patients, when they had this ikigai, this purpose of living, and combine it with this Katsu smile, which is indicated of appreciation of those around you. It could be nature, it could be your nurse, it could be your healthcare professional, but it was that kind of impact that is, yes, it's mirrored in Japanese society, but it's also mirrored in the different blue zones around the world. Whether it's Loma Linda here in Southern California, it's in Italy, it's in Okinawa, Japan. Those are the places, some of the places that were made famous. And it's
yeah.
this ikigai, and it's this purpose of living. It's appreciation of things around you and a sense of community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That documentary that was on Netflix talking about that, I think talked about the ikigai as well and how important that was. And it's a very strong, important component of neuroplasticity and having that positive mindset and getting up and looking forward to your day and combining that with repetition and intent to really stimulate the brain and to be able to keep it plastic so that you continue to learn and grow. It's the mindset is a very important piece of that. And your story also brings up another question for me. You learn best by doing, right? So what did you learn from your experience of using it on yourself to heal versus your training?
Yes. So on myself, the first thing I called is when I got back home, and I was weak. I couldn't even walk to our second floor story in our house. I called Dr. Sato and I said, Dr. Sato, I've had a heart attack. And I said, what should I do? He says, well, I've trained you. You know what to do. Go ahead and do it. And I said, okay. And I just confirmed. I said, do I put the bands on my arms, my legs? He says, no. He didn't give me specifics. He said, Steve, think. I've taught you for 13 years. You know what to do. And he says, call me tomorrow and tell me what the effect was. And you know, again, I was still in shock because I was in a hospital for so long and had lost so much memory. the 9 days I was out, it's still a blank slate. I don't know what happened. For 9 days, my life were just out. But I did what he said. And then I called him the next day and I said, yeah, I did it. I didn't feel anything. He says, no, you don't, you don't feel anything in your muscles. He said, do it again tomorrow. Call me tomorrow. We did that for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then about 3 weeks into it, he said, and I called him again, and I wasn't consciously um, feeling anything. After 3 weeks, he said, okay, put your wife on the line. He talked to my wife and he said, have you seen any change in your husband? And she said, yes, remarkably. And she had me, we were on speakerphone. I never asked her if she had seen changes in me because I would just in my own consciousness. But she was seeing changes in me, whether it was responding more quickly, responding as I normally do. And he said, okay, good. It's only been 3 weeks. Keep on doing that. Let's
Mm.
talk in 3 months to my wife. And 3 months went by, 6 months went by, etc. And every time we were call, he would put my wife on the line, the person who was with me, living with me, who could observe these changes over time much more objectively than I could on my own self. And so that's how we sort of, I learned you need to be patient, you need to be gentle, and you need to have the ability for someone else to view your own increase in cognitive awareness, in regaining your memory. And so that was quite profound for me to understand from Dr. Sato.
Yeah, and that role of the caregiver and helping to monitor and track your progress and lead it and guide it is so critical. We've heard it from Dr. Sanderson, we heard it from Gary, and tomorrow we've got two couples who are sharing their lived experience, both with stroke, and one of them is was well, in both cases, actually, the caregiver is the one who's doing most of the presentation and was guiding that person's overall program that they created themselves. And so I think they will also speak to your point of it takes time because it's very hard work to rebuild those neurons and in your brain and to grow the new cells that are needed for this. And that's the thing with neuroplasticity. I found that, and I'm glad to see that you've brought it up, is it takes time. You have to have the patience and to give it time to work. But there is a point at which in any of these modalities, and you heard Dr. Sanderson even speak to this, that it does not work. And you have to find out where to draw the line, right? And say, this is not working for me. I need to go and try something else. Are there any situations in your case that where you've tried to apply KAATSU to something and it has not worked? And what would those situations be like?
Yeah. So one of the good things about KAATSU is a concept we call double stacking. So in other
Mm.
words, I used KAATSU in my own rehabilitation as I was responding to emails. Some of the emails were from friends and families that Steve, glad you didn't pass away. But I was doing KAATSU as I was doing a primary activity. Then what was happening was I was, since I was at the house, rehabilitating, I was folding clothes, I was washing dishes, I was doing other things as a primary activity, but I was doing KAATSU. And so when there is sort of the law of diminishing returns, you sort of improve to a certain extent, and then you're no longer improving at a linear rate upwards. Then we recommend to individuals, as I found myself, is okay, I'm getting my memory back, but then I'm also building back those 30 pounds that I'd lost when I was out. And so when we talk about appreciation, ikigai, those small wins, even though my memory loss, that was not the primary focus, I was able to do other things. I was able to go out and walk our dog. I was able to do
Mhm.
other things. And that's what Dr. Sato wanted to express to my wife, but more importantly, pointedly at me. Talk to me after 3 weeks. Talk to me after 6 months, 3 months, and 6 months. And so, even though things are not going to always increase exponentially, there will be other wins along the way. Some of the wins are simply to now I can go for a walk for 20 minutes. Well, coming out of the hospital, I couldn't even walk up one flight of stairs. And so when we get to these points, and some of the points have to do with, for example, a spinal cord injury. When we have
Mhm.
spinal cord injury, that's a difficult case. Some of the cases are more an issue that the healthcare provider doesn't want to do KAATSU at all, like my own cardiologist. And so sometimes we hit roadblocks, and and we don't force anybody to do it. We don't say, hey, this is an alternative. It might not be for you, and that's okay. That's what the healthcare provider, that is what their role is, to protect and to enable that their patient to heal. When we get those roadblocks, we just say, fine, no problem. If you ever want to come back to do KAATSU, please do it. And that is what we've done in numerous cases. Patients have started KAATSU, got to a certain point, said, okay, I'm sort of, I don't think I'll improve anymore. And we say, fine, no problem. Come back to us in a year when your body has additional time to heal or not to heal. Just come back to us. And so I learned from Dr. Sato. I mean, he was doing KAATSU on a 104-year-old woman who was bedridden and not being able to communicate with anybody. He was not giving up on a 104-year-old. And
Talk
so,
about persistence.
yes. And so this is what we do. We don't give up, but we are also balance that with gentle, with empathy, and with an appreciation for all of those around. It could be a spouse, it could be a healthcare provider. So we just work with everybody within the family and just say, hey, we'll work with you when and if you want to work with us.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming in, Steve, and I want to get to some of those. Before we
Uh-huh.
get to those, I want to encourage individuals to drop your Q&A into the Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom panel if you haven't already. And then I also want to encourage you to take a few minutes and answer the poll about our performance. This is our last session of the day, so please do take a minute and rate this specific conversation. We will have another poll at the end of the day to give us some feedback on the overall day. So please think about your comments on this poll specifically for this discussion. Okay, John, there's quite a few questions. I'm sorry, Steve. There's quite a few
Oh,
questions in here. This question was from somebody named John.
okay.
So there's quite a few questions in here about the use of KAATSU with somebody who has amputations, if they've got a double leg amputation or other limb amputation, and how do you put that into or consider that in your treatment?
Yes. So if they have any kind of residual limb, so if there's a little bit of room to put on the band on their arms or their legs, then we do it. When there's no residual limb, when the amputation is either above or immediately below the joint, in these cases we put the bands on the other limbs. We have done KAATSU on amputees with 3 missing limbs. Generally, they're soldiers, unfortunately. And so we always view the human body as one vessel. It's got a one vascular system. So if we have one limb, we have the ability to modify the blood flow from head to, their torso. So we do apply bands on the other limbs. If there is any kind of residual limb, it could be above or below the elbow or above or below the knee, we still put the bands on that limb.
Okay, thank you. I've got two specific such neurological challenges here. People are asking about stroke recovery. One, there's several questions around that, and lymphedema. And then I'll throw this one in here as well, is can it be used for children? So I'll let you answer those three.
Okay, so I'll start with the last one first. We've done KAATSU on children as young as 4. Generally, we use the KAATSU on the younger kids for broken bones. Generally, it's orthopedic injury that we come to us. We have done KAATSU for some high school students who've had who have PTSD to some extent, and depending on where that PTSD came from, it could be a sexual abuse case, it could be accident they saw, a death they saw. Then we modify our protocols to be appropriate for that. For people who have stroke, this was one of the most impactful things I've seen in Japan when I was being treated, and we do the same thing in the United States. Depending on the side that that the individual is most severely impacted, we put the band on the impacted side. It sort of doesn't sound intuitive, but when we understand that we're trying to modify the blood flow, it is intuitive. So let's say that it was my left side that was impacted. I put the band on the left arm and the left leg. When we do this, then we do simple movement. Initially, it could be simply trying to open and close the hand. We progress from there to holding a spoon, holding a pencil, holding different things. Eventually, we progress all the way to, and this was in Japan, we don't necessarily do this here in the United States. We actually have that individual take a pair of chopsticks, and we have grains of rice on the table, and we ask them to pick up a single grain of rice and move it to the other place. And so we look and we ask the individual, as the bands are inflating and deflating, as their arm is engorged in blood, we ask them to do very specific movements. Now, of course, this is often done with their physical therapist. So often we explain to the physical therapist, and then the physical therapist then is working with the patient on a frequent or daily basis, or the caregiver. And so in these cases, we ask the individual to do certain things. Many of our older stroke survivors say, I want to be able to sign my name to a check, to a letter, etc. And so that is what we focus on. We put the bands, they inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate. As the individual has a pen or marker is also nice because it's big and thick. And then we ask them to sign their name. Now, initially, some of them is very difficult to hold the marker or the pen. We just say, try to hold the pen, inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate. And so it's a very, very gradual, very, very gentle process, but we keep those sheets of paper. We literally keep the sheets of paper and we date them. And it's really motivational for the individual to see January versus February versus March. And they gradually be able to see the legibility improve over time. And that is really motivational for the individual to actually see their concrete action in place. And then also with neuropathy is in these cases, we do it on both limbs. We start off with a very, very, very light pressure. Very light pressure. And we do very simple things. If it's on their legs, we simply ask them to sit comfortably and curl their toes. Ask them to raise their toes. Ask them to rotate their ankles. Very, very simple things. Now, what happens in the body when that leg is engorged in blood, simply moving your toes or rotating your ankle provides a lot of muscular and nerve interaction in the leg when the leg is engorged in blood. And so it's these very gentle movements that lead to profound changes.
Yeah, and so there's Feldenkrais or somatic movement, that these very gentle movements. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those therapies, but that seems to be part. It's supporting that entire principle, which is relearning those very small movements so that you don't injure the nerves, and you learn to train yourself in that specific movement. But then you're adding another layer onto that with KAATSU, right? Which is this oxygen flow component of it. And so I can see how those two work really well together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question here about how this differs from regular PT, which we sort of just addressed, but in a little bit different light. But I think it's worthwhile for you to address that specifically. How does what you're doing differ from what somebody would get from a traditional rehabilitation, a neurological rehabilitation system or
Yeah.
service?
There's actually no difference. We want the physical therapist, whatever their specialty is, to continue to do the exact same thing that they do. The exact same thing. We don't expect the patient, and we don't expect a physical therapist or occupational therapist or speech pathologist and change nothing. What you're doing is correct. All that we ask is that they do it with the bands on. And when they do it with the bands on, they can actually, if, for example, the person is stroke patient and they cannot hold the pen yet for at all or very long, we actually ask the caregiver or the physical therapist to actually hold the pen in their hand and move the pen or marker as they're going. And so the physical therapist, we instruct them how to incorporate KAATSU with what they're doing exactly. So they don't change anything they do. We're not expecting, and we don't want them to change anything they do. All we're saying is if you engorge the limb of blood, you create this additional blood flow in the limb, and it could be with an amputee again. You do that, the impact of your physical therapy will be enhanced.
Okay, yeah, and that is sort of what I assumed would be the case. So a couple of other questions here, and I think one is how do they get access to this system? Is it through physical therapists? Is it directly through KAATSU? Can you walk us through how you would get access to it, what the cost would be, does insurance cover it, and those types of situations?
Yeah. So you can, there are, I don't know the exact number, there are physical therapists, there are hospitals in their physical therapy departments that use KAATSU. So if you are at the, for example, University of California, San Francisco Medical School, if you're different clinics around the United States, you can act. Your physical therapist is trained in KAATSU. Now, that's a small percentage of the total number of physical therapists in the United States. But most of our users outside of the military, outside of university settings, actually buy directly from our website. And we have a variety of programs online that actually educate people how to use KAATSU, how and why and where, what pressures, how long, et cetera, to use KAATSU. And frankly, most of our users are over the age of 60. And
Okay.
so we're talking well over 70%, probably closer more to 90% of our users are over the age of 60 who are non-military users. And so those 95% are buying the products. We have two products. They do functionally the same thing. One is $1,300 and one is $2,500. The bandwidth and everything, the protocols are the same. The only difference is the more expensive unit is operated through an app, and the app can monitor your information, keep your information. You can share that information with your healthcare provider or your spouse, a friend, etc. So one is, I would call it analog, and the other one is digital, but functionally the bands are the same.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. There are a lot more questions specifically on individual challenges. And Steve, I will make sure I send all of these questions to you. I want to encourage you in the audience, if you're interested then and learning more about KAATSU, please do reach out to Steve. And Steve, what's your web address?
It's KAATSU, so KAATSU, and so down there. Again, it means additional pressure. KAATSU,
Okay.
KAATSU.com, and all the information is there. We have different programs, different discounts available, and that's the information right there. You can take a picture with your phone, and that QR code will take you directly to the information.
Great, thank you. And then you will be receiving this presentation. Anyone who's registered will receive the presentation, and all of this information is included in there, the entire interview and the sets of slides. So you will be armed with the information you need to take it to your physical therapist, to take it to your doctor, and then to do your own research. And that's genuinely what I encourage. I want you to do your own research so that you are comfortable with this. We are not trying to sell anything here. We're trying to bring you the information that you probably will not receive anywhere else, so that you can do your own research and evaluation. I want to thank you, Steve, and I've got a couple of closing remarks for the day and a good overview of what's in store for you tomorrow. So if you'll stick around for that, we will move into that. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.